exciting to see all of the enthusiasm in this room. We want that to continue all the way through to November so we actually can capture this seat this time. Immigration is a top issue for us. And let's know that national security does begin at home. It begins with backing the blue. Those are our police officers, and it requires that we have border security. A country without secure borders is not safe, nor sustainable, nor sovereign. A country with porous borders is at great risk. I believe the very first thing we must do regarding immigration is border security. We must have secure borders before we look at any other of our broken immigration policies. I have to wonder if the last 8 years of the prior administration's broken immigration system perhaps was favored by those who wanted and were seeking open borders. Our country cannot long sustain if we do not have secure borders. That means that it could be a variety of things. I support stronger border patrol. I support a wall, especially in those places where border patrol says it will be the most effective. There are new and innovative ways to secure our border as well. Things like drones. There can be sticky traps, all kinds of different things. However, it's essential that we look at all the tools in the toolbox to make sure that our borders are secure. I believe that Minnesotans and Americans deserve that. We expect that of our leaders. And just like I have stood firm for our law enforcement, our National Guard in the state of Minnesota, I will stand firm in Congress as your Congresswoman to support safe, secure borders, again, and to back the blue.
I'm Jim Hagedorn, Republican here for Congress, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I want to stand up just so I can see everyone as we talk. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Thanks to Will in Blue Earth County and Carol. Appreciate you moderating and all that you do for the party. You know, there's lots of issues on the table. I just want to give you a quick heads up about our campaign. We're rolling. Things are going great. You know, at that last campaign, we were in this building, 2016 on election night. And it was late in the night when we left, and we came very, very close, but it wasn't meant to be, and we kept at it, and we'll talk a little bit about that later and how we persevered. The campaign's going great. Now, securing America's borders. I'll tell you what, both teams in Washington have failed at this one. After 9/11, that was the best excuse or reason we had to secure our borders and start protecting our country in that way and revise our immigration system, get back to the rule of law, and we didn't get it done. And a lot of that's on our party. I'm not one of these that just blames the other team when they make mistakes. But I'm really proud that we have a president who's made this a focus of his administration, who's trying to turn things around. Yes, border security, the wall, it's very important, all of the above. But you know what I don't understand? How 17 years after 9/11, the passport and visa system in this country is still messed up. We don't know who's leaving our country. We don't know when people overstay their visas. And some of the people on 9/11 caused some of those problems by being out of compliance with their visas. It needs to be biometric. We need to do that. And then when you get into other issues in border security, hey, look, I'm a Republican, but I also talk to people out there across the communities, people in farming and agriculture. We need a viable work program for people to fill actual jobs. They can come and go, maybe they can build up credits as citizens. But that's being held hostage because the Democrats want 15 million or whatever citizens to vote. The Republicans want border security. I'm all for that though. Merit-based immigration has to happen. This chain migration needs to go away. This idea because you know somebody, you can get in, and we're not vetting them and making sure that doesn't work. We need folks that are going to come to the United States, assimilate, contribute to our economy as best as possible. Those that don't really shouldn't remain in the United States. People always say the Democrats do. hey, we're a nation of immigrants. That's true. People in my family came from Germany many years ago, almost 150 years ago. But you know, a lot of people came here, it didn't work, they went back. And we didn't have a welfare system that allows people to stay and not assimilate. So we need folks that will do that. I would move into the area also of Islamic terrorism when it comes to our borders and national security. Am I out of time, Spencer? All right, okay, thank you. And you know, the last administration, open borders, it flooded this country with many people, refugees from countries that hated America. We have a problem in that area, assimilation, terrorism, and welfare. In 2015, I called for a refugee settlement timeout. That's the first in the nation, even before President Trump waded into the issue. And you know, that's the right thing to do. We want people to come here, but we want them to assimilate. My competitor had a little different view. She thought that the best way to handle that issue wasn't to have a timeout, but to give the Somali community $18 million in your taxpayer dollars. And I don't think that's the right way to go. That's just going to invite more problems. We need to get a handle on this and move forward. So with that, that's my answer on immigration. Thank you.
Our second question, and we'll begin with Mr. Hagedorn. This district values its agricultural roots and its rural values, yet we see our small communities struggling economically and our population decreasing. What is your plan for agriculture and rural development?
This is one of the 4 planks in why I'm running for Congress, is to sustain agriculture and our rural way of life. And you know, our communities are under pressure. I was born in Bloor, where I live today. Grew up on a grain and livestock farm just outside of Truman. Many of my Truman friends are here today. My father, grandfather, great-grandfather, all southern Minnesota farmers. In our little town, our community of Truman, there's my mother, stepdad, and sister right there. Remember those days. You know, it used to be a vibrant little community, but there are fewer farmers needed to work the land now, and it's tougher to have people stay in our communities. They're under pressure. And these last 4 or 5 years, since the middle of the Obama administration, farmers and agriculture, many agribusinesses have effectively been in recession. Low commodity prices, high input costs. And some of that is because of bad government. So first and foremost, I want to go to Washington and be on the Ag Committee, serve on that committee, and do everything possible for our farmers in our rural communities. But part of that is just what we have to do to reform the economy and make these changes that Republicans and President Trump and I ran on in the last election. We need to get rid of bad government in Washington that's hurting our farmers. This regulatory policy, like things like Waters of the United States that the Democrats reformed in the last election, that put a bullseye on agriculture. That would have been a disaster, giving the federal government power over our land, over our farmers. We got to have regulatory reform. The House and the Senate should affirm regulations that the executive agency writes, especially the EPA. Then we need to do things like get rid of this Obamacare. That's crushing farmers. It's like the biggest issue in agriculture, because when farmers are breaking even and losing money, you know, taking $30,000 or $40,000 out of their pockets for insurance with a deductible so high the insurance is worthless, that's terrible. Then you get into energy policy. You know, half the price of a bushel of corn almost is energy costs. Electricity costs, very important for livestock and others. The last administration, folks, had a war against agriculture. Nobody wanted to talk about it, but that was the truth. From the tax policies like the death tax, to the regulations, to the energy policies, on it goes. And so those are the types of things we need to do at the federal level to help sustain and support our farmers. Now, I gotta tell you that there's some people running in this office, running for office against us on the other team, the Democrats. And they're running even further to the left than Tim Walz on most all these issues. One of the guys running went through the parade saying, act on climate change. You know, for a farmer, that means you're going to quit today or you're going to quit tomorrow. That's where we are on that. That's how radical they are. But if we continue along this path and do everything we can to reform the government, reform the economy, help our farmers and agriculture, it'll have a profound effect on our rural communities. And this is a national security issue. Where would we be in our country if we had to import our food the way we import our oil and other products? We'd be relying on countries that were not reliable, countries that would give us less quality and higher prices. So for that, I will be a strong proponent, and I will do my best to serve on the agriculture and support you every day.
Well, thank you for the question. question on ag. Now, before I get to that, I want to address some inaccuracies or maybe give you a little bit more context. On the immigration question, Jim talked about $18 million for Somalis. What does that mean? Let's put some context to that. The author of the bill was Senator Abler, I think. Yes, Senator Abler. There's room for four other co-authors on the bill. I was the last co-author on that bill. But let me tell you about that. Do you think bills actually get passed like they're introduced? Never. Because that's what happens. It goes through the committee process, it gets refined, and it comes out the other end. But let me tell you about what the intent was on this bill. This bill was to help people who are here legally get off of welfare and into work. It was an economic development bill. The author of the bill, who chaired the committee, his intention was he had to reduce health and human services spending. It's growing at an astronomical rate. And you have to ask yourself, people who are already here legally, do you want them to stay on the public dime with welfare? Or do you want them to have those tools to go out and be productive members of society? And in fact, we need to make sure that any of our, these could be refugees who come to our country, to our shores. Our responsibility is to make sure that it's their responsibility to make sure that they are productive. They need to be productive citizens. And yes, they do need to acclimate to our culture. When my grandfather came here from Norway at the turn of the last century, he couldn't even come into this country unless he had a sponsor who would help him. In other words, the government was not going to do that. Well, we don't live in that world anymore, but we do have people coming to our shores, and it is our job, just like President Trump has talked about, which is get the tools out there, help them get those skills so they can be productive members of our society and not be on the public dime. The fiscal note for the bill in question actually showed that over time it would actually save costs. And that was the intention. But let's talk about the amount. 18 million was too much. The chair of the committee who authored the bill knew in his mind, because he controlled the budget, it would be less than $250,000. So not a lot, but the point is give them the skills that they need to get off the welfare. That was the point. I do have a strong voting record, but let's talk about ag. I come from a long history. My roots are deep in the ag community. Both my parents came from farms. My mother's farm is a family farm, still in the family. My dad was a sharecropper, and of course that farm didn't follow with the family, but as soon as he could, he bought a farm. Now, all the good things that you've heard about ag and what needs to be done, I've already done in the state legislature. I have rolled back regulations on our ag producers. I have stood up to the governor on his overreaching buffer strips. I called him out when his people were increasing fines dramatically on that. I have stood up for, fought for, and achieved a state tax conformity, a greater conformity, so that our farmers could pass their farms on more easily to the next generation. I supported the Young Farmers Act. I supported agriculture innovations, helping to get Palmer amaranth out of our farmers' fields. I support getting the government off our farms, out of our pocketbooks, and I have a long history of not just talking about it, but of voting to do those things.
Thank you. And we will exercise decorum here, please. No heckling. Thank you. Question number 3, we'll start with you, Senator Nelson. If elected to Congress, you will take an oath where you will solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Describe to us what an ideal national security policy looks like.
Thank you. You know, that is the job number 1 of government, is to keep its people safe. We talked about safe and secure borders, backing the blue. We need to have strong national defense, and we need to have smart foreign policy. Of course, that begins with peace through strength. Certainly, we need to have better relationships than what our last president left us with. I'm gravely concerned about the poor Iran deal and how that has empowered that country in its nuclear proliferation and what that can do to us. I'm concerned about our national security. But we have to be concerned about North Korea as well. Over there we have a regime that is unstable, I would say murderers. We have to be careful. Now to that point, I have to tip my hat to the president, who for the first time that we can remember has the North Koreans and the South Koreans speaking together. I think that's a step in the right direction. Thank you. And I always believe, you know, but trust but verify. So let's not let down our guard. Let's be very clearly about that. Certainly, over in Syria, we cannot have a madman like Assad murdering people with chemical weapons. I applaud the president for attacking those chemical weapon dumps. And quite frankly, those are the type of hard lines that need to be taken. Russia is one of our largest geopolitical foes. Let us not forget for one moment. We would be in much better shape if President Obama and Hillary Clinton had not spent the last 8 years playing patty cake with this regime. And so, yes, we have a lot of issues in front of us, a lot of hot spots, many of them left over from the previous administration. But I applaud the fact that our country now is putting a line in the sand, standing strong, and standing against dictators and murderers like Assad. So I believe peace through strength, and that means you have to be vigilant, and you need leadership that is willing to make those hard calls. We have a lot at stake. We have a lot at stake. I still believe we are the greatest country on earth. We are the shining city on the hill. And if we want to protect that and our way of life, we need leaders who are called to serve, who have a higher calling, and who will stand for our rights, and who will protect democracy. We must stand firm with Israel. It is our greatest ally in the Mideast. It is one of our greatest allies in the world. And just happens that you might notice that Israel's 70th birthday was just 2 days ago. And it has had a significant tough road. But we know that Israel is strong, and we will be stronger when we continue to defend Israel. So there are many hot spots in the world. What does that tell you? We need leaders that are strong. We need leaders that are real, and leaders who have America's best interest first.
Well, I was fortunate enough as a pretty young kid to work on Capitol Hill during the Reagan Revolution for a congressman named Stanglin from the northwest part of Minnesota. Arlen was a good conservative, and I saw firsthand President Reagan and his Peace Through Strength administration and everything he did to rebuild our defenses. And the thing I admired the most about President Reagan is the way he stood up to our adversaries. He stood by our allies, and people always knew where he was coming from. He was a very successful guy. Part of that was taking on the communist expansion around the world, whether that was in Angola or Mozambique or in Central America. And he stood tall, and he showed you that sometimes you have to be a little tough in order to, in that case, win the Cold War. That was probably the greatest achievement in the last 50 or 60 years of our country, for sure. Winning the Cold War and getting us to where we are. Do I want a strong military? Yes. Is our military in trouble? Yes. Do we need to build and remodernize? Absolutely. But the bill that the Congress and the President passed about a month ago to fund the government with $1.3 trillion, much of it borrowed money, was the wrong way to go. The Pentagon, every agency of government should be reformed. That was kind of my background when I was on Capitol Hill in another capacity. And the Pentagon is the first place we need to go in and save tens of billions of dollars and take that money and apply it to modernizing our weapons systems and giving better pay and benefits to our troops. We have to get back to some fiscal discipline in Washington because that's a threat to our country as well. Now, part of this you have to talk about our foreign policy. I have to say, President Trump was dealt a very bad hand by President Obama. President Obama, for whatever reason, decided he was going to go into the Middle East and other places and undermine U.S. allies and neutral actors. People like Mubarak in Egypt, Gaddafi in Libya. And even when you look at Iraq, what he did there, leaving, pulling the troops out without a status of forces agreement to keep the peace. The whole place was on fire, refugee problems, Islamic terrorism and supremacy in the eye that you can see. Everywhere there's a problem. You know, I think the senator and I just have a little bit of difference of an opinion when it comes to this whole Islamic supremacy thing. We do want people to come to our country lawfully and legally. We want them to assimilate. But we don't want people who are going to come here with ideologies that are in conflict with Western culture and our Constitution. And there are people in our country today that have those attitudes, and we've had problems with that, and so it's a serious threat. Before we bring people into the United States as refugees, we spend $20,000 per refugee. It's a fair question. Is that really in the best interest? Or should we build safe zones around the world so we can keep them there and repatriate them in our home country? Secondly, we also spend on average about $107,000 when they come into the country on various benefits. And when someone says, you know, what's the best way to get somebody off of welfare? I don't think it's to give them more welfare. I'll be honest with that. And so I think, frankly, we invite more problems, and we need to take a different approach than throwing money at it. That would be my suggestion.
Question number 4. We'll begin with Mr. Hagedorn.